Hey, females! So welcome back to the first case for this week of Favorite on Friday. In today's case, I am currently filming in a hotel room, so if you're wondering why the background looks different, I'm currently out of town, but of course I feel y'all still deserve to get videos regardless, and so I'm recording this on Wednesday, so by the time I get back in town Friday, these videos will be up and uploaded. I guess will obviously be up, but they'll be up in public, ready for public view. And so anyway, so this first case is kind of a heavy one. We are going to Indiana. This case goes across some state lines, so basically Indiana and Iowa, so it's not like multiple other states. And so this case is actually a heavy one. It's actually a well-known case. The women you'll still see in the thumbnail, you may not recognize them, but this crime, you more than likely have heard of this case if you are a true crime fan such as myself. And so of course, always let me know what you think down below, and let's just go and get started.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, baby, you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my nightmares, standing right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing me?
So we're going to start with the mother, Gertrude. Gertrude Nadine Van Fossen was born on September 19th, 1928. She was said to have been her father's favorite child. However, sadly, when she was about 10 or 11, he apparently died of a sudden heart attack right in front of her. So as you can imagine, this is very traumatizing. Instead of comforting her in this time of the loss of her father, her mother had apparently actually blamed her, and she would have nightmares. And apparently, also, when you have nightmares, she wake up like screaming and stuff. Instead of comforting her, her mother would yell at her for waking up her siblings. And so then apparently her mother was physically abusive to her. And so her mother and like her female siblings, or her sisters, would basically call her a prostitute and call her promiscuous. And so sadly, I guess like instead of trying to prove them wrong, she actually goes and tries to prove them right. And so she goes and seeks like male attention. So she winds up marrying this guy named John. We're going to call him John Sr. And they end up marrying when she's 16, he's 18. Apparently he is a police officer, and apparently marrying at 16 was okay back then. Because I think this was like the 40s. So yeah, 16 apparently was okay back then. So they get married, they have like 4 children together. You got Paula, Stephanie, John Jr., and Marie. Gertrude apparently wasn't doing like the typical household wife like duties. Apparently because her mother had never taught her. And so John Sr. was apparently like very physically and mentally abusive to her. She would leave after 10 years, and she had sole custody of the kids. She would get remarried to a guy named Edward. However, that marriage only lasted 3 months because apparently he couldn't stand the kids. So he leaves. She's now divorced twice. She gets remarried to John, has 2 more kids, Shirley and James. So they now have 6 kids together. They're married 7 years. They divorce again for good. She then starts dating this younger guy in his 20s named Dennis Lee Wright Sr. We're going to call him Sr. And it's obvious that he's using her for sex and money, but I guess at this point she just wants some male attention. So, however, sadly, he was actually abusive as well. And apparently she had gotten pregnant by him at one point. He didn't like it. He punched her, causing a miscarriage. She gets pregnant by him again, decides to keep it a secret until later on in the pregnancy. And then she reveals it, I guess, like right before she goes to give birth. So that she comes back from the hospital, I guess. She gave birth to Dennis Jr. And when she came back, Dennis Sr. had packed his stuff in a dip. Like by the time she came back. So he left like while she was at the hospital giving birth. She, of course, files for child support, which apparently was a thing back in the 60s. And she never basically gets a single dime from Dennis Jr. And because she's a woman and a lot of places won't really accept women for like income and shit, she basically is living off child support from John Sr. because they got 6 kids together. So I think the court would say that he owes her about a good amount of money since they got 6 kids together. And so by this point, Gertrude had like 6 kids. If we're including Dennis, she has 7 kids, 7 living kids, and then she had like 6 miscarriages, sadly. We don't know exactly who each miscarriage is with. I know it's just one with Dennis Sr. The rest may have been with John. There may have been like one with Edward because she was with him for like 3 months, so there could have been one with him too. You know, it's just known she had like 6 miscarriages. Of course, at one point, while in her late 30s, Gertrude would apparently get ill with a bunch of illnesses, asthma, bronchitis, etc. This would result in a receding hairline, sunken eyes, and a skinny appearance. And apparently she looked 20 years older than she actually was. So even though she was like late 30s. She looked to be almost 60. And so, Gertrude would actually go around she wouldn't go around telling people, but I guess like when they would ask, she would call herself like Mrs. Wright. And because she had like this newborn child, so obviously people go want to know like who the father is and say, hey, well, I was married, but he basically like went off. Sources say she would tell people he went off to the military. Other sources would say, oh, he just left me outright, like just left me with all these kids by myself. I guess like I want to say to gain sympathy, but also apparently it was to save her reputation because this was the 60s and having kids outside wedlock wasn't exactly as acceptable as it is now. And so Paula, I guess their oldest child, Gertrude and John's oldest child, will get pregnant when she's 17 by a older married man. So a shotgun wedding's not even an option because he's already married. And so that's alone is going to ruin her reputation. But of course, we're over trying to keep the pregnancy a secret. But apparently it's known in the house that she's pregnant. But like from the outside world, keep it a secret. So then one day Paula will go meet with her friend Darlene McGuire, who introduced her to Sylvia and Jenny Likens. So of course you got Sylvia Marie Likens, who was born on January 3rd, 1949. She was said to have been like, I think, the third child of 5 kids. And so, yeah, like the third child of 5 twins. So there's a set of twins born before her, a set of twins born after her, and she's in the middle. So yeah. You got Diana and Danny, who Diana was already married, she'd already been out the house, that good stuff. Danny apparently was still living at home, and then you got Benny and Jenny. So Jenny apparently had suffered from polio and was wearing a leg brace because one leg was like shorter than the other, and so and of course kids being mean and stuff, Sylvia would also be very protective of Jenny, like you do when people are mean to your siblings. Of course, basically the story goes her father Lester was a carnival worker and needed someone to watch Sylvia and Jenny because they're underage girls and most of the carnival workers were grown men. And as any good father, he did not feel comfortable with these grown men around their underage daughters. And then Danny and Benny were staying at their grandparents' house because they didn't feel comfortable staying at Gertrude's house after a couple times of being there. That should have been a sign, but you know. So apparently, their mother, Betty, or Elizabeth, whichever one you want to call it, she apparently was in jail because she went to jail on July 3rd for shoplifting, apparently. She wanted some shorts and didn't afford them. I guess, like, couldn't afford them, so she put them in her bag. Clerk in front of her took the shorts out the bag, gave the girls $2. She said, try to stretch it out until I get out, because I don't know when I'm going to get out. So Sylvia had apparently even babysitted, and apparently most of the money that she did make from these babysitting jobs, she would give to her mother basically to help out with finances in the house, because she knew, I guess, as one of the older children, because she was the third oldest in the household, she like kind of knew times were tough. So apparently Stephanie had met Sylvia in school and they became friends, so that's how they even know these two families even know each other in the first place. While at a sleepover, because apparently they did do sleepovers often, Lester had apparently complained to Gertrude about how he was going, like, where was he going to find a place for these two girls to go, and then it says Gertrude suggested, and other sources say Leroy asked, so it's not clear exactly who did what. But the idea came up that the two girls could stay at Gertrude's place with these other 7 children for $20 a week, which now apparently equates to about $150. And that's not per child, that's for both of them. And apparently $20 was enough for Gertrude because her rent was only like $55. And this is 1965, so. And so there was one week where the payment was late. And apparently she had had the two girls bend over, and she spanked both of them, like as punishment for the payment not coming. And she apparently said that she had watched the 2 little bitches for a week for nothing. And then literally the next day, the $20 money order came in the mail. Not even an apology or anything. And then, like, I think Lester had apparently came back and gave her another $20, I guess, to go ahead and pay for next week in advance. Sylvia apparently came home from, I don't want to say school because it's still technically summer. But she came home from something. She came home to Gertrude's house from something. And she came home, and apparently she had said something about her having a boyfriend back in California, because apparently, like, while they were traveling around for the carnival, they were in California, and she had kind of made, like, a boyfriend at one point, and apparently this annoyed Paula, and Paula had apparently kicked her in her lady bits. She apparently was starved and apparently ate food out of the trash. The family was very poor, so all they had was, like, you got soup, crackers, I think some bread, so, like, and the toast. There was a church function where Sylvia apparently ate a lot, which again, understandable, because again, if there's not a lot of food at home, obviously we're gonna be eating a lot. And apparently, that's what Paula apparently told Gertrude, but apparently Sylvia didn't eat anything at this function. And it's actually said that the kids did. But apparently it's like anything Sylvia did technically was wrong. Like, even if it wasn't. So she gets home and they are passing around this random ass hot dog around the table, and they're just loading up with condiments like ketchup, mustard, mayo, relish. I guess like any condiment you can think of to put on a hot dog. And they pass it to Sylvia. They force Sylvia to eat it. She does. She throws up. Forced her to eat her own throw up. And so apparently it's said that was done by Gertrude, Paula, and this random ass neighborhood kid named Randy Lepper. And so Paula must really hate Sylvia, because Paula done hit Sylvia so hard she broke her own wrist. And then you think that would stop because, broke her wrist. No, she gets the cast that she broke her wrist with and beats Sylvia with that as well. And so another day would come where this new couple moves into the neighborhood named Phyllis and Raymond Vermillion. Apparently, they go over to the house and somehow see Gertrude, even though the house is technically in poor condition, with these 7 kids, and thought, well, I guess 9 if you count Jenny and Sylvia. These 9 kids was like, oh, I could add my 2 kids to this, causing 11 kids, because she must be doing so good with these kids. And they go over, like, for a barbecue. Like, I guess they have a barbecue at their place to, like, get to know them better, because they have common sense, and I just go leave their kids to anybody. And they see a Sylvia with a black eye. Paula notices that they're noticing Sylvia, so she goes, apparently in front of Gertrude, she goes and pours a cup of boiling hot water over Sylvia in front of Phyllis and Raymond. Neither one of them said anything, never reported to nobody, nothing. So apparently, some time goes by, apparently 2 months go by, and Phyllis sees Sylvia with a black eye again. This time she has visited the house again. Paula sees this, she takes off her belt and starts beating Sylvia in front of Phyllis. Phyllis does not say anything to Paula. She doesn't go to report to anybody. She just basically keeps her mouth shut. So another day will pass by where Sylvia apparently was collecting cans, like old Coke cans, in order to exchange for money. So apparently that service existed back then too, so that was nice. Gertrude apparently had accused her of stealing the money, even though there's no proof, and apparently she was known for like picking up cans in the neighborhood to exchange for money. So then apparently she was punished for that, was punished somehow for being a thief. Apparently, at one point, Sylvia would get asked, like, how much for, like, sex. Because apparently there was a rumor going around that she was a prostitute, despite her being, like, 16 at this point. And she said, no, I'm not the one in the household doing the prostituting. And apparently, she kind of unintentionally started a rumor that Paula and Stephanie were the prostitutes in the house. So then, of course, the rumor gets back to Stephanie's boyfriend, Coy Hubbard, and he goes to the house and beats her up. They even get her best friend at the time, Anna Cisco, to come beat her up after she was told a lie that Sylvia apparently called her mother a whore. And then apparently she even tried to get Jenny to beat her own sister up, because remember, Jenny and Sylvia are sisters, and then Jenny refused, and then apparently was told that if you refuse, like the same thing will happen to you, basically. So then she basically hit her own sister, which I'm pretty sure she hated. I think as a punishment for being like accused of theft, she has cigarette butts put out like on her skin, so whoever smoked, whether you lived there or not, you could just put your cigarette butts out on Sylvia. And so she will be force fed the feces and urine of Dennis Jr. by Gertrude and John Jr. Yeah, John Jr. Apparently by the way, she gets put in the basement. So, like, I guess to like be distanced away from everybody else. So while in the basement, Gertrude basically tells her that if you can hold it the rest of the night without peeing on yourself, you can sleep upstairs. So she already knew that Sylvia was about to fail, because by this point they were abusing her lady bit so much that she pretty much like couldn't control her bladder. So then, of course, the next morning arrives, and sure enough, Sylvia peed herself. So that as punishment, she is made to come upstairs, be dressed when she comes upstairs. She has to do a striptease in front of Gertrude's own sons and apparently some other neighborhood kids. Now, by kids, I don't know if these are kids around John's age or like actual kids, but apparently like the boys are like cheering it on. And apparently she has to pleasure herself with a glass Coke bottle, and Stephanie apparently walks in on this and then slaps her, and then Gertrude apparently takes the glass bottle out, and apparently there is a good amount of blood that comes out of Sylvia. At some point, like in the beginning of October, apparently Gertrude was stop letting Sylvia be able to go to school. This is because apparently Sylvia has stole a tracksuit that she apparently needed for gym. I don't know if it was for gym class or she was trying to in track or what it was, but apparently she needed a tracksuit. Gertrude was saying they couldn't afford it because apparently they genuinely like couldn't afford it, and she stole one. Gertrude found it. She admitted she stole it, and of course she was punished. The Likens family would eventually come back for, like, I guess to come back to visit, and somehow didn't notice any difference. So they eventually stayed, and were supposed to stay there to the beginning of September, which sadly, that of course would be too late for one of the girls. So then they see the older sister Diana, the one who's married, but she's approaching divorce. So she's married, but she's about to be like divorced. They see her in the park. They tell her about what happened. She didn't believe them. She said she was hungry. So of course Diana gets her a sandwich. She knows that's her sister. And Maurice, the youngest from her first marriage, Gertrude's first marriage, she sees this. She tells Gertrude weeks later, not like that same day or even the next day. She waits till weeks later to snitch, and then of course Sylvia gets punished. So apparently she would see Diane again weeks later, apparently at the same park. This time she had told her about the abuse, not last time. And so of course Diana didn't believe her. She thought she was just being dramatic, and she didn't like being punished because apparently, like, I guess Sylvia and Jenny were like the type that needed to be punished, but like weren't punished because their mother apparently was letting them run around and do whatever they want to do. So a father in the neighborhood apparently was telling the school that there was a child at the house that had sores all over them, and a school nurse apparently was sent to the house, but Gertrude basically said that it was because Sylvia had run away because of her poor hygiene. In early October, Diane apparently went to go visit the house. Gertrude apparently opened the door and said that she couldn't come in, and that was an order from Lester and Betty, so her own parents. And she, of course, didn't believe this, but of course she couldn't just bust in this lady's house because then obviously that's illegal. So she leaves, but of course she came because she had that suspicion. So the urinary problems that Sylvia had, remember I said from being kicked in her lady bits. Now, when she was in the basement, there was no bathroom, so she pretty much had to use it on herself because, like, where else she gonna go? She was made to eat her own feces, and there were times where she had to pee in a cup to eventually drink her own piss. So there were times where it said that she was given a bath, and I'm using air quotes because there was no soap involved. It was just boiling hot water, and she was, I would say gagged, but she was bound, like tied up, and just basically just thrown into the tub of the boiling hot water. And apparently this happened multiple times a day. And there's some days it didn't happen at all, but the multiple times a day, you can imagine that's very terrifying. So Gertrude would actually charge some neighborhood kids like 5 cents to come and torture Sylvia. And so the neighborhood, I think of course you got Darlene, you got Judy Duke, you got Mike Monroe, you got Richard Cobbs, who apparently was Gertrude's like assistant. You got Corey Hubbard, Stephanie's boyfriend, that good stuff. One day Gertrude would mark I'm into Sylvia's chest with a hot iron rod apparently. And apparently the smell was too much for her, so she asked Richard Hobbs, her assistant basically, to finish the job. She wanted him to have him spell out, I'm a prostitute and proud of it. So basically she already did the I'm, so just do a prostitute and proud of it. However, he didn't know how to spell prostitute, so Gertrude had to write it down because she wanted to make sure it was spelled right. So Shirley, the daughter, apparently was supposed to write an S. We don't know whether it stands for slave or Sylvia, or possibly even both. And somehow she messed up and the S ended up becoming a 3. And then Gertrude basically said that Sylvia can't get married. She can't take off her clothes in front of anybody because she's been branded and nobody want to marry her if her stuff looks like that anyway. And since you basically said my daughter were prostitutes, I basically did this to you. And so one weird day comes where Sylvia is woken up and she has clothes put on because she's normally naked when she's in the basement. She is made to come upstairs. She has decent clothes on. They actually have this nice little bath for her. And this is because they want her to write a letter addressing to her parents saying that she had run away with this group of boys. She got raped, and apparently by all of them, so basically gang raped. And they branded her, which displays I'm a prostitute and proud of it. That's where she got that from, in case they're wondering. Except she had the letter addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Likings, and remember, this is her parents, so she would just say mom and dad. Apparently Gertrude had made some plans to just leave Sylvia in a forest and leave her for dead. On the early morning hours of apparently October 26, 1965, Sylvia was trying to escape after apparently hearing those said plans. While in the basement, she apparently was screaming for help and apparently was banging a shovel against something. And the neighbor Phyllis heard it, but because it stopped shortly after 3 a.m., she thought the situation had been handled and that the police didn't need to be called, even though technically Sylvia was still technically alive during this time, so she could have been saved. However, sadly, she wasn't. So then the morning, the actual morning, shows up, and so somehow she gets out of the basement, gets I guess it says to the front door. She is hit by a curtain rod until the curtain rod bends by Gertrude. Then the curtain rod is grabbed by somebody else, and then that knocks her unconscious. She is dragged back downstairs. While they, I guess, some point after this, they decide they gotta bathe her body. Cause I don't know if she stinked or, well, obviously she would stink, but I don't know. They were just bathing her body, just to be bathing it, and then while Richard and Stephanie were bathing her body, they had seen that she was dead. Her cause of death was obviously blunt force trauma. Gertrude believes she is faking and apparently calls her faker and is just over here hitting her with books and shit until she sees that this is real. So she tells Coy to call the police, but do not call the police here. Call the police like at a payphone somewhere and say that she ran away and this is how we found her. But we had been taking care of her. So, like, apparently Gertrude had rehearsed with all the children before the police got there. Like, this is what you said to police. And everybody had said the same thing, which, of course, that should have seemed a little suspicious to the police. But Gertrude apparently left the room. And at this point, Sylvia was dead. And she was like, look, if I don't get out of here, I'm next. So, okay, so Gertrude left the room. And then Jenny whispered to the police officer, like, if you get me out of here, I'll tell you the truth. Which, of course, the fact that everybody's saying the exact same thing, that should seem a little scripted, which it was, should seem a little suspicious. Of course, police are like, okay, they got her out of there. Gertrude also did not want Jenny to speak to police unless she was in the presence of them. But she was like, look, my sister died. I'm not trying to die next. So we go to the police station. Jenny, of course, tells everything. Gertrude was arrested along with 3 of her children. So I'm assuming Paula, John, and Stephanie. And then apparently 5 of their neighborhood kids. And apparently, Coy and Richard. And so, all the, like, younger juvenile kids were released under the condition that they would come to trial to testify and were only charged with injury to person. Gertrude would say that the only reason Sylvia slept downstairs is because she had a bedwetting problem and didn't want the mattress to get messed up because back then mattresses were expensive. Paul actually gave birth to a daughter during the trial and apparently named her Gertrude. She apparently was adopted and apparently is now currently a doctor, which I don't know if that's true. But if she is a doctor, good for her. Gertrude, Paula, and John Jr. were charged with first-degree murder. Stephanie would have her charges dropped due to lack of evidence. Coy and Richard would be charged with premeditated malice. Coy, Richard, and John Jr. would get manslaughter. And then Paula and Gertrude would be given life without parole sentences. Marie, Shirley, and James apparently were sent back to the custody, was sent to foster care, and then John Sr. would get custody of them in the late 1960s. Dennis Jr. that technically wasn't his kids. Apparently Dennis Jr. would get adopted, still in foster care, but it wound up getting adopted and has the last name White. A retrial will be done. I guess they felt their life without parole sentences were fair. And so a retrial will be done, and Paul would only have to serve between 2 and 21 years in jail. Apparently she only served 3, despite 2 attempted jailbreaks, and apparently was able to legally change her name to Paula Pace, and apparently now currently lives in Iowa. Coy and John apparently had served 18 months at a juvenile jail. Richard apparently did too, and apparently he started smoking even heavier after everything hit. He realized what he had done, and so he had died of lung cancer at the age of 21. December 2nd, 1972, Dennis Sr., which is Dennis Jr.'s father, had died while serving in the Vietnam War on January 27th, 1977. Shirley allegedly died April 4th, 1978. And I'm saying allegedly because even though I did find an obituary on Shirley, and the last name is not exactly common, so it very well could be her, there's a Facebook page suggesting that there is a Shirley on Facebook in Indiana, and she's around the age that Shirley would still be if she was still alive today. And she does mention Stephanie, and apparently she doesn't live in Iowa. So it's very well possible that could be Shirley. But again, Shirley apparently was a somewhat common name back then. So it might not be Shirley. The Shirley in this film might actually be dead. Anna would die on August 23rd, 1996 at 44. Coy would be out and he would be in and out of prison for the rest of his life. Apparently he was a suspect in a 1977 murder. And apparently there was a complication with an acquaintance. And so he somehow got acquitted. And so there was a movie that came out. It's called An American Crime in 2007, starring Elliot Page and playing as Sylvia. And because of this, Coy got fired because he never changed his name. So it was kind of obvious that this is the same Coy that was involved in the case. So then, of course, apparently he was said to have been very humiliated after the movie came out, which, hell, as you should be. And he ended up dying of a heart attack June 23rd, 2007. So that same year the movie came out. John Jr. would change his name to John Blank. Just like his dad did. And he worked several jobs before he became a minister. He at least claims that he is sorry, and it seems that he is genuine. Like, he genuinely is sorry regarding the acts he committed. And he died on May 19th, 2005, due to complications of diabetes. Gertrude was sentenced to 18 years to life and was said to have been a model prisoner. She in 1985 she changed her name to Nadine Van Fossen, which is apparently is her middle name and her maiden name. I guess to go under like I guess somehow she was still allowed to do that, and that caused a lot of outrage with people because it's the murder of a child. And apparently, sources say like within 2 months they somehow got like 40,000 signatures to send to the parole board to keep her in jail. Other sources say like 4,500, so that's obviously a vast difference. But we know at least a lot of people like signed this petition, and apparently there was protests as well. So it was a big deal. The parole board still let her out in 1985. She would die of lung cancer in 1990. Jenny apparently has clipped out a piece of the newspaper when she seen Gertrude's obituary that said that she died, and she sent it to Betty, her mother, and said, old Gertie finally died, and then she said like some other stuff. Betty, the mother, sadly died on May 19th, 1998, so she lived a pretty long life. Jenny would be basically like a nervous wreck, and she apparently still slept with the lights on, understandably, and was still very traumatized by what happened between her and Sylvia, which again, understandably. And she sadly would die at age 54 of a heart attack due to an unexpected knock on the door, which is said to have been a pizza man. John Sr. did die on Halloween of 2007. He died Halloween 2007, and he changed his last name to Blake, like he did with, I think it was Marie, Shirley, and James. He did the same thing with them to disassociate themselves from the tragedy. In the spring of 2009, the house where the murder happened in was supposed to be a shelter for abused women. So, that's nice that abused women have a shelter they can go to. The funds were never, completely made. So the building is torn down and it's currently a church parking lot. What they did with the money that was supposed to go to this building, I don't even know. One of the neighborhood kids, Randy Lepper, died November 12th, 2010. In October of 2012, there would be a scandal come out in Conrad, Iowa, where Paula was actually said to be a teacher. Remember, I said she wanted a Paula Pace. She lied on her record, and apparently somehow they did not see her on her record. So she was able to be a teacher from 1998 to 2012. So that's 14 years. And the dates there was an anonymous call. And I guess they didn't like that Paul was a teacher, understandable. And that the school did an investigation. The dates of birth match, and she did confess that she lied. And she kind of looks the same as she did back then, a little bit. And so she obviously was fired. Stephanie had also become a teacher. So Paula and Stephanie became teachers somehow. But remember I said Stephanie's charges were dropped. So because Stephanie's charges were dropped, she was able to legally become a teacher because she didn't have those charges on her record like Paula did. That she lied and had the charges, then she would have been fired like Paula was. But of course she wasn't. She currently is in Florida with a different name. Apparently is 73, I think, and living her best life. Even though her phone number and her address are currently online. That same year, so earlier that year, on February 5th, Dennis Jr. actually died and was cremated. Lester died on February 22nd, 2013, so he outlived almost all his children. At least the 5 children that we know of, he outlived everybody except Diana, damn. Around Mother's Day 2015, Diana and her new husband, not a new husband, but second husband, Cecil, had disappeared. The family freaked out. They had out the silver alert, which apparently a silver alert is like an amber alert, but it's like strictly for elderly people, which that's kind of cool. So 2 weeks later, Diana would be found alive, in critical condition, but alive, and her husband Cecil has sadly passed. Diana is still alive, and all the Likens children. Darlene allegedly died on April 8th, 2017. And I'm saying allegedly because the obituary that I found, while this woman is a little old, because it says Darlene is older than Sylvia. And Sylvia was born in 1949, and this one was born 1947. So that would make her a little older than Sylvia. But this is not the woman, if this is not the Darlene McGuire, and her name is Darlene McGuire, and I don't know her middle name, otherwise I would have searched her for a good name. If this is not the Darlene McGuire that was involved in this case, I would like to apologize to whoever's family this is, and I would like to apologize to this woman even though she's no longer with us. But if it is, then it is. But if it's not, I'm apologizing now. And Marie died on June 8th, 2017. So basically, Paula, out of all these damn kids, Paula and Stephanie, the 2 oldest, are somehow still alive. And Shirley is allegedly alive, but Shirley apparently was a common name back then, so she might be dead too. Anyway, so yeah, that was the case of the murder of Sylvia Likens. Of course, I didn't want to call it that because it's like a well-known case. So, obviously, And technically, two of her technical killers did become teachers. And so I just thought it was a pretty interesting case. Let me know what you think down below. If you know any cases like this, definitely let me know, because this is the only case I've ever seen that's like this. And so, of course, I will see you fail from the next one. Bye!